What is a hero? A mythological figure, often of divine descent, endowed with great strength or ability? An illustrious warrior? No. It's a person admired for achievements and noble qualities, one who shows great courage. Welcome to the What's a Hero podcast, where we dive deep into what a hero is and what makes them that hero. I'm your host, Ken Frownfelter, and I'm going to be introducing you to some of the world's most likely and unlikely heroes. You may have never heard of them before, and they most likely have never met you. But they all have one thing in common. They are ready to do whatever it takes to help make you better, even if it means sacrificing everything for you. Let's get into it. Welcome to episode 20 of the What's a Hero podcast.
I should have played basketball, but I didn't. That's actually one high school regret. And then my senior year, I ended up playing lacrosse. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's something you don't hear too many people say, oh, I was a lacrosse player or whatever. But that's
definitely not.
That's a difficult game. That's more difficult than people give it credit for, from my understanding.
I think so. It's a lot of fun. And the cool thing is we had kids from different backgrounds, different interests. It was kind of like the, I don't know what the right word, but kind of like the fringe sport back then. So yeah, it was kind of cool.
It's not the top three: baseball, basketball, football. It's probably in the same line, might be even below soccer, huh? Because a lot of people know soccer more than they know lacrosse.
For sure. Yeah.
So you're going through high school, and then did you know what you were going to do after school? Did you realize? I'm going to
education. I'm sorry.
No.
Education was always something I had planned on doing. I didn't know what that looked like. The school I went to for college did not have an education department at the time, so I majored in speech and communication. But what I wanted to do as a kid, and especially when I was in college, I wanted to help. I wanted to help people. I even threw around the idea of the Oregon Police Corps. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. So there's a lot of different ideas running through my mind way back when. Then went education route with grad school. So
I'm gonna segue to what is the Oregon Police Corps?
And hopefully I'm getting that correct. It was a program that if you signed on with a police department, they would pay back your undergrad degree and then pay you while you're going through the academy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
how come I never heard about that? I would have never. And it could be a different program or something, from where I was at the time, but I went the old fashioned route. So that's okay. Either way, getting back to it, you said, I'm just going to go ahead for education then, huh? And started going towards that. Did you know what you wanted to teach? Did you know what you wanted to, you were doing speech and stuff. Was it like English or what were we thinking?
For me, it was always phys ed and health. I've always had an interest in health, and physical education, just, being active myself. When I was in graduate school, though, I was told, there's never going to be any PE jobs. So it's like, all right, well, I'm not going to waste my time. At least I thought I wasn't going to waste my time. And then I went the elementary route. So I focused in on K through 5. And that's where my heart is right now. I mean, I love the kids. Every day is different. It's pretty fun.
Yeah. So was it going through that? You're trying to figure out that you don't like. Did you say I don't want to do high school, or was it one of those things that I think K through 5 would be funner? I know that's not a word. Not something I should kind of a teacher. I know, and I'm gonna pause this. We're gonna bring him back here in a second, hopefully, because my stinking internet went out. Or maybe his internet went out. No, it's mine. Are we back?
Yeah, we are.
There
Okay.
Okay. I was wondering about that. I saw that happen and I said, I'm going to pause it real quick because I knew that that sometimes happens. Our internet's not always the absolute best, but all right. I'm going to press get going again. So you are in school and you're doing the undergrad thing. And I guess my question before we had a little bit of a technical difficulty was, did you consider doing high school or did you want to do just 5 through or K through 5, or what was were you happy with where you were, or what was?
That's a good question. And I think what it comes down to is I listen to people and their opinions. And I allowed that to influence my choice. So what I was told back then, and this was like 19, 20 years ago, PE and music positions were being cut left and right, and districts weren't hiring PE people. So I listened to my advisors. I went elementary ed. They pulled the, well, you're a male. They'll want males in elementary schools. So that is where I went with that, and the funny thing is, ever since I graduated grad school, guess what? There is like almost every single year PE openings, which is,
You're kicking yourself, huh?
well, no, it's all good. I spent a year doing high school PE around here, and I found out I am much more suited for younger kids as opposed to high school kids.
Oh, okay. So what, I had a question when you were saying that, what was, I guess thinking about it, when we always listen to people and they say, oh, this is going to be the best thing for you. And you start going through things and you realize, maybe you look back and you say, yeah, but at the time you're like, but I want to do X, Y, Z. I want to be, but, oh, I know what the question was, is why did they want more male teachers? Why do you think they were telling you male teachers are good for like kids, like young kids, elementary school?
Just at the elementary level, normally at most elementary schools there's like 1 or 2 males, and then I have a lot of opinions about it, and I think for a lot of kids that age, it's important for them to be around some males and see, I don't know the best way to say this, but just, trying to frame how I'm going to say this. I think there's a lack of males in kids' lives these days. Mm-hmm. And whatever you constitute, whatever people give a meaning to being a man, right. There is a difference, I think, a lot of times. And I think it's important for kids to have male and female teachers, just because a lot of times things can be different. I might connect better with certain kids than a female teacher might. A lot of that just has to do with personality. True. And yeah, I'm not sure if I answered that question.
No, I get it. I understand it. In my mind, and I always thought about it like, that a kid needs to see how adults are. Kids need to see how adults are, because that's what they're going to be eventually. No matter what, a kid is going to become an adult. Now they need to see how females do what they do. They need to see how males do what they do. And I guess everything that's in between. But when I look at it like this, it's a good thing that a mom and a dad are in the house. A mom and a dad are good because a kid can see that. a man and a woman do what they do, because that's what they're going to be. So if they see, let's take a girl, for instance, she sees how her mom is. So she needs to see how that is, because that's how a woman acts, and that's how a lady should act. And so she's going to take how she's going to be based off of how that person is, how her mom is. So she knows, okay, that's who I can grow into. But with a male, if she sees her dad, or she sees a male, grown male, she can start looking at, okay, that's how I interact with somebody of the opposite sex. That's who I can start looking for in a, I don't know, a mate, or somebody I'm going to share my life with. I know how they interact, and I know how they interact with me. So a boy can look at it the same way. A boy can see how his father acts, especially to his mother. And then a boy can actually see how his mom acts and says, oh, that's how a lady acts. And that's how, so a lot of times this is world according to me again, but I see people that want to, they grow up and they marry or they get involved with people who are like their parents. Like my wife, she says, oh my gosh, you do all these things that remind me of my dad. Well, not that she wanted to marry her dad, but she obviously found an interest in somebody who had the similar attributes as her dad, and vice versa. There's things that a guy might look at and see in a woman that says, that reminds me of my mom, she cooks like my mom or whatever. And so whether that's true or not, I see that as being kind of the thing where people go, where they need to see how a man and a woman react and interact as adults, because that's what they're ultimately going to become. But I also see what you were saying, where you were saying that sometimes you're going to be able to talk to a kid because you are a guy. Maybe a boy, he doesn't want to open up to a female, or, whatever the case may be. And I see that, and that totally makes sense to me. So.
Yeah, it can just be different, and the relationships, I know for my own self, growing up, going to school, different relationships with male teachers versus female teachers, it was just different, and that's, I think those differences are pretty special. And that's what, getting a different teacher every year can add to a kid's life. And hopefully, ultimately that's my goal, is to be able to add some positiveness, add some belief, add some confidence in those kids' lives that I have worked with year after year. So
Right. I think that's awesome. That's totally cool. I remember being a kid, and I would hear people say, "Oh, I have a male teacher," or whatever, and I would say for the first, until I got into high school, no, I'd say 8th grade, I never had a male teacher. It was all female teachers. And so, especially when I was in elementary school, and there were people like, oh, I have a male teacher. Like my cousin, he was in high school, I was in elementary, and he would talk about, oh yeah, my male teacher, whatever, he's Mr. whatever says to do this and blah, blah, blah. And I'd think, oh, that's weird having a guy as a teacher. But because all I ever knew were female teachers. But it worked out enough. And I think that seeing that ability that anybody can be a teacher, whether it's a guy or a girl or whatever, can be a teacher that has some validity in being able to shape and or help other people. Now, were there teachers that you had that said that kind of shaped how you teach and how you are, or did you develop your own thing, or did they motivate you enough to be like, I want to be like that teacher?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think back, I had big, mean Mrs. Thompson in 5th grade. She wasn't big, nor was she mean, but that's what we called her. She was great. She was biggest heart in the world. She actually got me to actually read some books in 5th grade.
I'm guessing you were a reader back then, huh?
Not really. And then I had a PE teacher, Mr. Ill, throughout middle school. I was also his teacher's aide my 7th and 8th grade year. And like, if I could have taken, if I could have had PE all day long, I would have. And there was a few others in high school as well. I had a strength training coach in Southern California who was extremely influential on me with training, and just, getting good grades, and how there's other things outside of just athletics. And there's some other teachers as well that were huge just in, growing who I am. And then, in college, there's a few as well. So
Right.
it's all very influential people on who I am today.
And so if you could go and go back and see any of them, be like, hey, check it out, look what I'm doing 17 years, or look what I'm doing this, and I got this idea of doing this thing or this lesson or whatever from you when we did it when I was in whatever class, and that would be something that would be kind of cool, huh?
Oh, for sure. And it's funny you mentioned that, because Mrs. Thompson, I didn't know this, but I actually went to school with her daughter up until my junior year. And I never knew that, but I emailed her a few years ago. I searched her out. I emailed the old elementary school. They forwarded her my email. And I thanked her, because I told her that, hey, you are one of the important parts on why I became an educator.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
So you're now doing K through 5th grade. And have you been doing that your entire 17-year career so far? Or are you looking at having different age group in that time, or what?
There was 1 year. I left elementary and I worked for another school district. I did a year of high school health and PE with a little bit of strength and conditioning thrown in there. And I realized very quickly that my heart belongs with elementary school age children.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, if the opportunity is right for something else, and it's the right fit, I'll make the jump,
But right now your heart's where it's at, huh?
It is. Yeah. I enjoy it. I love every single day. It's one of those deals for me where it's like things can be going fantastic, and then 2 minutes later, things could be falling apart, but then 2 minutes later again, they could be wonderful and fantastic again. No day's the same.
And are you like a set grade right now? Set grade teacher, or is it?
I am. Yeah, I am. I am teaching 5th grade now. My district, we created an online school. So this year I am working from home. I'm running everything through Zoom, which is quite the challenge. But I am solely working with 5th graders right now, which is pretty fun. That's
cool. And so you've been doing K through 5. So have you done every one of those grades throughout that time, or is it?
I've spent some time with 1st grade, 3rd grade, 4th, and 5th.
So you get to do all those guys, and I guess I'm going to go back to my last episode with Vicky, and I'm not sure if you know her or not, but she works in the same district as you, just at a different school. But she was talking about how she's a music teacher, and she gets to see the same kids for 5 years. And so she always has, and so like with kids, they go from 1st grade to 2nd grade, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and then they get a different teacher every time. However, the music teacher is always the same music teacher. So she sees all these kids, the progression over the 5 years, and then sees them again in another 5 years after they've gone through middle school and are in high school. And they're like, they've got they're growing beards, and they, all this different stuff. So, but she has this time where she knows them, she sees them every week, and she sees them all year long. You get to see the same kids all day long, but for 1 year and then you might see them again the next year, but they're in a different class. You just see them on the playground or walking the halls or something like that. Do you get the connection with the kiddos and like she might, or is it is there that point where you're able to kind of separate after the next year and all that stuff like that?
Oh, that's a great question and a hard question to answer, to be honest with you. So I would categorize myself as a connection-based teacher.
Mm-hmm.
My main goal is to connect with all my students at some level, and really build those bonds, because unless those bonds are built, no matter what I say or what my lessons look like, the kids aren't going to trust me. So if I can build that belief in what we're doing and show them that I believe in them, there's nothing cooler for me than like being in town and running into one of my students. And because it's like, I still see them as a fifth grader or a fourth grader, and, they're grown up, they might have some kids now, which I've been in it long enough that a lot of them do. But no, it's a cool connection that we can build throughout that year, because this is going to seem kind of corny and everything, but you know what? They're still my students.
Sure.
And I think of them as that.
And that's cool. Have you ever had the children of one of your students? I remember.
Not yet.
Oh, okay. So
not yet.
You get like a 30-year career. You're eventually going to get that. I'm assuming. I mean,
yeah,
it's possible, I suppose.
It's it could be coming closer than I'd like to admit. So,
so you're teaching basic elementary, so you get to teach math and English and history and do all that stuff with fifth graders and all that sort of thing. But so you don't have a specific one topic, one subject kind of class or kind of teaching, as if you were a high school teacher, you were a math teacher, or you're a history teacher, whatever. But you get to do all those things. And when you're doing all those things, obviously you have recess, you have lunch, the kids go outside. You don't just stay in your classroom, because I've been to your school and you're that teacher that's out on the playground.
Yeah.
The times that I've been there, I've seen you there. So is that like an everyday thing, or is that just, you guys have a rotation that you guys kind of do that?
That's something that I do.
Uh-huh.
Some other teachers done that in the past. To be honest with you, I don't know what to do with myself during my lunchtime. So I eat and then I go outside, just because I enjoy being outside. And really, speaking of making those connections,
Mm-hmm.
It's easy for me to play Foursquare with a group of kids, and they don't see me as Mr. Huet, the teacher,
Right.
or playing basketball or jumping rope or playing catch. And, it's those times that can kind of really be the time in which students are won over.
Yeah.
Where it's like, hey, these teacher people, they're normal people.
Right.
And we like to laugh, we can play and have a good time. And yeah, that is a huge part of what I like to do on a daily basis.
And that's cool, because when I was a kid, you would have never seen our teachers out there playing. And if they were just standing out there with their arms crossed, watching, as making sure we weren't fighting, or making sure we're all following the rules or whatever. And you never saw them out there playing. And when I went out there, at your school, I went to visit your school, and I saw that you were outside, you were playing, I don't remember, you had a ball and you were throwing ball with the kids and stuff like that. And when you see them having that interaction, that's huge, because that's actually like one of the top tenets of leadership, is that you build the relationship with people. Because if you have a relationship with people, you have the ability to be able to speak into their lives about the things that they're doing and the things that they're getting involved with. So if they're doing something they shouldn't be doing, you can say, hey, you have a place that you can say, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. Or if they are doing something, having that place in their life, you can actually give them kudos for it. And it means more coming from you. It's like when you were a kid, you never wanted to get in trouble by your grandma. Anybody that's got half a brain in their head never wanted to get in trouble by their grandma. They felt terrible. At least I did. Felt terrible if you got in trouble by grandma. And so because she had that special place, she had the relationship with you. And I think with that, not to say you're somebody's grandma, but you develop a relationship with people. You can say, hey, don't do that. Hey, you should do that. And that's where you get to be as an advisor, as you were talking about. And now you were talking about when you were older, but you can be these kids' advisors and say, hey, you shouldn't do that because it's not good. And then eventually they're going to be looking back and being like, years ago, I had this teacher who I really respected. And he kind of encouraged me not to do X, Y, Z. And so now I don't do it, which is, I think, huge, because just building relationships is what we should be doing on a daily basis with everybody, with whether it's, people on our own teams, people that we are in charge of, people that are in charge of us, vice versa, however it works, our family members, our wives, husbands, kids, brothers, sisters, mothers, whatever we develop relationships with. And I think it makes a big difference when we do that. So that's awesome that you do that. That's really cool.
Well, thank you. And, I couldn't agree more with what you said. A little bit of belief in somebody else goes a long way for them, and it's amazing what that can do for anybody, really. And, if that's what I'm able to do, I think I'm doing okay. Then I'm doing my job.
No, I agree. I think that's fantastic, because you don't get you don't get a lot of that. And I know when I was growing up in the 80s, we didn't get a lot of that. There wasn't a lot of, adults speaking positively in the kids' lives. And if nothing else, I remember being admonished more than anything. I rarely ever got, the you're the best we have or anything like that. I do remember my third grade teacher doing that. She said, you can do this. I actually have you in mind for the school play. And I said, oh, really? What? And we did the Charlie Brown Christmas. It was a Christmas play, and I played Linus. And she said that she specifically asked that I would play it. She called my mom and all this different stuff. And I was like, all right, that's cool. So I played Linus in the school play, and the hardest part was trying to memorize that monologue that he gives at the end of that episode. But we figured out a way that I memorized the majority of it, but then another part of it, I just kind of, I wasn't able to do it in time, for the play. Whatever the case is, we've got it figured out, and it worked out pretty good. And but the fact that she had that much faith in me to say, I want you for that meant a huge thing for me. But then, the next year I went to fourth grade, and I had a teacher who told my mom that I was stupid and that I might need special ed classes or something like that. And I'm like, no, you're just boring. But as Vicky and I talked in the last episode, kids learn differently. Everybody learns differently. And I don't think that was something that was necessarily a big deal, a big thing back then. Nowadays, everybody considers, okay, everybody learns differently. And like you said, you had to, maybe you can get through to somebody that somebody else can't, Mm-hmm. So you're, over all that time, you are just going through life, and you I'm assuming you get married, you have kiddos, you have a life, and you have a family and all this different stuff. But, and the reason I assume that is because, my daughter had a teacher who looks a lot like your wife with the same at one point. So I'm assuming, but she had to, I know she was a big deal for my daughter because she became pregnant while she was she's my daughter's teacher. And so that's that's obviously while you guys are developing this whole career that you have of serving and being there for kiddos and doing all this different stuff, you're also trying to make your family and be who you guys are. So now you guys get into that point where you are both teachers, and you are you're having other issues that are popping up. I guess, as far as you are concerned specifically, life isn't just easygoing and you're perfectly healthy and you have no physical ailments whatsoever. Am I correct in that assumption?
Can you say that again a little bit?
You're not
say that last.
Yeah, so you're not going through life where there's where you're perfectly healthy and you don't have anything getting in your way of being able to do the things you want to go do, whether it's physical stuff or anything like that, and you're able to eat anything you want and
okay,
stay thin and no problems, right? You can stay
that's
all the sports and the healthy stuff that you want to do without having to consider anything else.
That's where we get funny now. Okay. I heard what you said. Now I got you. So this year strikes 30 years with being a type 1 diabetic.
Uh-huh.
That is one of the greatest gifts that has been given to me. It wasn't always like that. I could talk about this for hours.
Well, talk about why. Okay, then I'm going to ask a question. Why is it the biggest gift? Because a lot of people find this as a curse,
Okay. So the challenges that it put in front of me, the amount of responsibility I had to have on my shoulders throughout my teens, my 20s didn't do so good. Kind of felt, to be honest with you, and this is kind of a weird one for a male that's like 200 plus pounds.
Right.
But I fell into an eating disorder that many diabetics fall into called diabulimia.
Mm-hmm.
It's where we restrict food and where we restrict insulin instead of like actually facing the fact that, hey, I need to do this a certain way. I'll just cut out eating and I'll cut out taking insulin. Long story short, going through those certain things has made me stronger as an individual, both mentally and physically. I would say my health markers now at 42 years old are much better than what they were in my 20s and my early 30s. And it's allowed me, kind of like teaching, it's allowed me to put myself in a position where I can help other people. So yeah.
How are you helping other people doing that? What do you do?
Well, I share my story as much as I can, just through the ups and the downs.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is where I'm getting more comfortable with this. I also work with diabetics with nutrition. Or not getting better at this, but getting better at plugging it. How's that sound?
Okay.
So I've been working with diabetics on nutrition for about 7 years now. And it's ultimately a way for me to give back, because the mental part of diabetes can be quite overwhelming. And there's 800 million ways to do things. There's 800 million ways that don't work. So it's just like anything else, right?
Right.
The internet is a wonderful thing.
So if you had somebody captive audience, not like held in a dungeon or something, but I mean, if you had somebody that you had 5 minutes that you can explain the most important thing in regards to diabetes and nutrition, what would those be? What would you say?
That's easy. Work with it rather than against it.
And so what do you mean by that?
So embrace it, take responsibility, take ownership of it. Let's revisit that word of discipline rather than motivation.
Right.
It's taking care of what you know you need to take care of, and being specific about it. You know, it's, you know, a lot of people say it's too hard, but really, I don't see why putting ourselves first and our health first should be a hard thing to do.
Right.
So
So
I'm not sure if that answered that question.
And so
but
I guess, no, it kind of does. And so I make sure, because I don't live with diabetes and I don't have people in my family with it necessarily, at least not that I know of. But what is type 1 is what you're born with, right? Type 2 comes on based off of poor habits and bad health sort of deal, or what are the two differences?
Kind of. So type 1, a lot of times, is an autoimmune disease. So I was diagnosed when I was 12. I got the flu really bad. I broke my ankle. So I had a bunch of different things happen to me. And then next thing I knew, I was diabetic. Some people are born with some different genetics with it, with type 1. Type 2, what it is your body doesn't really know how to use the insulin that your body is secreting. So does that make sense?
Yeah. So and is that something that comes on after time, or is that it's
a
not?
lot of it is lifestyle, you know. And I'm actually pretty thankful that I'm type 1 instead of type 2, because I can control mine through insulin therapy, whereas a type 2 has to be super careful of what foods they eat. And really, it's more of a roller coaster than what I have to deal with
I see.
in my findings.
Right. So then going back to what you said, is that in your 20s and 30s, you didn't do well, you got better, but now in your 40s, you're in better shape, you're in better health, you control your insulin, not your insulin, but your diabetes more than your diabetes controls you. You have all these things now than you did back then. Is it just because you chose to, I'm tired of living this life, that diabetes is in charge of me and I'm going to be in charge of it, or what is it?
That was a part of it, but really what it came down to is I needed to quit being selfish with having kids. You know, I wanted to be a present father. I wanted to be a more present husband. And by not taking care of myself, I wasn't allowing myself to be as present as I should have been. Just because there was a guilt hanging over me, knowing that I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing.
As far as eating right and making sure you were there for them.
Exactly.
Because I guess you could be sick or whatever during the day. I just don't feel good today. I'm going to go lay down in bed and be in bed all day because I don't feel good. And then you hear them outside playing or running around in the house and doing whatever, being kids, and you're not able to be part of that because you chose to not feel good because you didn't take care of yourself when you could have. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, and then I never got to the point where I'll just lay around. But really, like, my energy and my sleep and all of that kind of stuff was very low, you know? So me doing, I just wasn't at 100%. You know, my wife knew, she's a smart one. She can read people pretty easily. But you know, she knew what was up. She knew what was going on. And I just wasn't, I wasn't working with full energy and who I was capable of being at the time.
Right. And so what, other than just seeing your kids, and was it that the only external motivation? Was there something that triggered all this to say, you know what, I'm tired of this and I'm going to go, and from this point on, I'm changing?
Okay.
What was there?
Yeah. So yeah, there were a few different things. One, I had some funny blood work come through where some wacky levels. So I ended up having 2 liver biopsies and then a muscle biopsy like flew to University of Michigan to have a liver biopsy done. And the neurologist that studied my results from my muscle biopsy, he simply said, "You need to eat more." And I was like, well, cool. That was easy. And then that kind of propelled me with like, all right, I need to figure out, I knew better. And that was a hard part with it as well. I knew better all along. You know, I'd studied this stuff going back to college as well. It's the thing I enjoy reading about with performance and nutrition and all those types of things. Just I needed to hear it from, I guess, an authority figure,
Right.
like a doctor.
Yeah. You need to, yeah. And I had this, I guess, a similar issue. I knew something just a couple weeks ago, and I was on a Zoom call with somebody, and this person, they're like former Navy SEAL, they've written books, all this different stuff. And I actually I was on this meeting with them, and they told me, you know, these things that I already knew. And I was like, yeah, duh, I should have known that. But it's different coming from the horse's mouth, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting in shape, you're making sure you're eating right, you're doing all these things that is going to combat this diabetes that you're going to be in charge of, as opposed to it's going to be in charge of you. And then you maintain that whole exercise mindset that you've had since you've been playing pickup basketball games when you were a kid. And you said you wanted to be a PE teacher, you want to do all these different things. So you get into that and you start seeing that not only are you going to eat better, but you're going to work out harder and you're going to work out more. Is that right?
Kind of. And actually, you know, what it really turned into was like, I don't need to drive myself into the ground to do what I want to do. And I'm okay with that, because if I drive myself into the ground with training, yet again, that's a thing that could take away from the family and the kids. So it was just through time and learning, hey, this is what I can pull off. This is where I want to be. And the training aspect, it's something I love, whether or not is optimal for my health. That is yet to be decided. But I do approach it with like a seasoned approach, you know, where it's like, all right, this time of the year, I'm going to push things a little bit harder. This time I'm going to back off a little bit. And then just go with the flow.
There you go. You know, and I see you on social media or whatever, and you're always just, you're posting, you know, you're doing deadlifts, or you got some kind of or a CrossFit workout going on or whatever. And in the background, either they're in the background or right there, you're cheering on your children as they're just piling on the weight on the bars. Is that something? Obviously, I'm not saying that you're forcing your kids to go work out, but they enjoy doing that. That's a family thing for you guys, huh?
Oh, for sure. They come down. And, you know, originally what it started off as like, hey, let's just hang out. Or, you know, years ago, it was mom needs a break when she was a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah.
So the kids would come down with me. Now, you know, it's funny. Today, they finished up their school. They were down there. I hear some clanking around. Well, and they're playing with the barbell down there in the garage. So it wasn't anything that we forced upon them. It's just, hey, they watch, you know, and they mimic just like any other habits that we may have.
Right.
Or practices. So,
I mean, and that's the other thing, is that you never know what kind of inspiration or motivation, I hate using that word, but that's at this point, yes, what it is that you're going to be onto somebody else, you know, and if they get into it enough, they're going to eventually grow into those people who are, you know, adults who are, you know, working out and they're doing these things and they're setting it up for other people and they're making sure that they can help motivate and inspire other people. So are you, so you say that you get to actually go and you're for like this last 7 years, you've been kind of getting it out there, all that information. How do you go out about getting that out there?
That's a great question. And that's where, I used to be just word of mouth. I was the diabetic guy that can help other diabetics a little bit. Um, it's just the world we live in. I push out stuff on social media. Um, I have a Facebook group solely for diabetics. Um, and I hop on calls with people and we talk about goals and how we get there and we strategize and we see if we're a good fit. And then from there, I help people meet their goals.
That's cool. That's cool. Because I would assume there wasn't a lot of this obviously before the internet or in the early days of the internet. And now, are all your people that you talk to or you work through and strategize with, are they the people that you know, or are they just worldwide and they have these same issues and they just didn't realize there was somewhere to go with it?
Some of them, I have a few locals here and there just that I knew, and they seeked me out. But most of them are through Facebook, which is pretty cool. It's pretty neat to be able to have a conversation with somebody from Ireland or from the UK, and have check-ins from a guy from New Zealand, because we're all kind of the same. We all run into the same issues and we all have the same stuff going on. Just, the internet is a pretty interesting thing these days.
Sure. What is your biggest fear when it comes to diabetes? And I know
my biggest
fear, but what is the one thing that you always attempt to keep push back on as far as diabetes is concerned?
Like with myself, my biggest fear, or others?
With yourself.
That's a great question. I think the second guessing of myself,
Mm-hmm.
Or like wondering, hey, what are my numbers right now? Did I dose things correctly? Did I dose my food correctly? Going into the school day, are my numbers going to be okay? And that's where planning truly does come into place, and having a plan and sticking to that plan has been, it kind of eases that fear, most definitely.
Right. Do people find that what you have to offer as far as information on diabetes as good or relevant with current medical practices or what doctors say, or do they find that a guy who's living with it and doing it and succeeding with it is just as valid as what any of those people have to say? And I'd rather talk to the guy who's living it and succeeding with it rather than I'd listen to some clinical person talk about, the ups and downs and the current sciences of it.
That's a lot of that depends on the person, diabetics sometimes, not always. I'm going to stereotype here a little bit. Not a lot of us are very trusting of the medical community sometimes, just because they don't live it, they don't experience it. I can speak from my firsthand experience. With 30 plus years, I've put myself through the ringer, whether it's positive or negative. But yeah, it all depends on the person, to be honest with you. I mean, that's a hard one to answer.
Yeah, I guess because you don't know what those people are thinking, but I guess I was going off of more of in your experience. But I always think that if there's somebody that's done it, I'm going to listen to them. I'll listen and or read whatever the professional has to say about it. But if it's somebody that actually says, hey, I went through it and this is the things that I garnered from it, I find that to be so much more, I don't know, there's credibility there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if somebody who posts, all these things, that I'm as healthy as I want to be. And I still live with this thing, and I can still go do the things I want to go do. I could go to Disneyland with my kids, and we're gone all day from stuff. I just have to carry a bag, make sure I have my stuff with me. But otherwise, I get to go and do whatever I need to do whatever I want to do. And that's incredibly impressive to know that you personally sought that out and fought it and said, I'm going to do what I want to go do, as opposed to letting it just eat at you and then make you, overweight and slow and not do what you want to do and not be able to go out and play Foursquare with kids.
Well, that's my main motivator. I want to be that dad that still can, throw it down with, my son's 9 years old. And when he asks me to wrestle him on the ground or to play fight,
Yeah.
I better be able to move around, because he's an agile little guy and he's springing. If I'm not taking care of myself, there's no way for me to be able to hang with him. So,
right. And if you want to spend time with the kids, you got to be able to do it. And I think I mentioned that a couple of episodes ago, where if you want to go do things, you want to, be there for somebody, you have to take care of yourself in order to be there, and it's the same thing as that. You put your oxygen mask on before you put somebody else's on. You got to be able to be taken care of and be able to do what you need to do before you get to that part where you can't take care of anybody. You can't be there, and you're more of a detriment to other people. Physically, they have to drag you along, or you don't get to be part of the fun because you can't physically take care of that. So,
exactly.
Yeah. And I think that's huge. I mean, that you are looking at that whole side of things, where I want to spend time with my kids. I want to grow with them. I want to be with them. And I don't want to just see them. I don't want to live vicariously through them. Yeah, well, I can't do anything anymore. I'm in my 40s. And as somebody who's in their 40s, I knew that, I didn't know when I was a kid what 40s would be or what, but I'm in maybe better shape than I was when I was in my 20s and in my teens, and I can do whatever I want to go do for the most part. So there's some things I've chosen that I don't want to do that I used to want. Like I told my daughter when she was like 10, because she wanted to skydive. And I said, well, when you're 18, you can only skydive when you're 18, because that's, I guess I thought that was a law. I don't know. And so I told her, when you turn 18, we'll go skydiving. And so since then I had knee surgery and I had all this different stuff, and I'm getting close to doing the skydive thing. And they're like, physical therapist is like, oh yeah, you can do it. Sure. No problem. Do whatever you want to do. You're in great shape. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So now I'm holding off and talking to my daughter. And finally I go, it's like, okay, so I promised you we'd go skydiving when you turned 18. And, I'm building up the courage because I want to spend time with her. And she's like, yeah, I remember that. So do we have to? Like, so now I'm like,
Sweet.
I'm like out of it. But I always thought that would be kind of cool, except for my knees. But whatever the case may be, I wanted to be in shape enough to spend time with her and do things with my kids. So I think it's kind of cool that you put it like that, and you focus on it enough that you don't necessarily have to worry about it. You have to deal with it, but you don't have to worry about it. It's not your bane.
That time with the kids, I mean, that's something, no matter what, that's what they're going to remember. So,
right. And so I thinking about your day, that you get to do stuff, you get to either talk about, history or math or whatever, but you get an actual recess that you get to go play. How many people get to really do that? How many people, I don't have a job that I have a guaranteed break that I get to go play, and it's actually encouraged for you. And then, that's got to kind of keep your mind young too, that you're an adult there, but you got to keep that mind young. You keep it. And so when you get home and you're trying to have an adult conversation with your wife, you keep going back to Fortnite, or you talk about whatever. So does that happen? Do you notice, do you find yourself kind of revert childhood conversation when you're with adults?
That's well, recently that's hard to say because I can't remember the last time I had like real conversations with adults. Just because with everything going on.
There's people
But
say, "Oh yeah, who's talking to now? He's still not talking to an adult." Yeah, I get it.
we discuss school. We're still able to have adult conversations. Nothing too. We keep it pretty light at our house, just because I'm sure you can understand this, because sometimes school can be heavy at times, and if we allow that to go home with us, sometimes we'll be real quick, get it done with, get it over with, and okay, let's talk about other things.
Let's go back into our personal world as opposed to work, and always having that responsibility on us. You got to take that break away and take that time to get out of it and stuff. So totally makes sense. So I always ask a question of everybody, and I ask it in a different way, but I usually try to go through this, and you kind of touched on it a little bit in the early part of this podcast, but if you had the opportunity to go back and change something, and or it is the day of your funeral, and they can bring you back for one day and you can go make something right, what would you go do? What would you be able to, whether you can go say something to somebody or you can go fix something that you messed up, whatever the case is, you have the opportunity to go back and right a wrong. What would you do?
Oh man.
What would
that's a huge question.
Or I guess
to be honest,
right.
Say that again.
I guess, or have the opportunity to say something to somebody that you never thought you would have the opportunity again to say,
I let's see here. I think one of the things I would have done is when I was in college playing football, I would have asked for help when, I wasn't taking the best care of myself.
Mm-hmm.
I would have owned my behavior at that time, instead of, letting it weigh me down. And I think being able to express that way back when, 20 plus years ago, would have been a huge weight off my shoulders and would have allowed a lot more clarity with what I was doing at the time.
Yeah.
And I think it now, at the same time, though, you know what? It was a great learning experience as well, because I wouldn't take, in hindsight, at 42, comparing myself to 19-year-old me, not taking care of myself, that taught me life lessons. So
sure.
It's a hard question.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can go back and say, well, I would have liked to have done XYZ, but had you done XYZ, ABC wouldn't have happened in the first place.
For sure.
You may not be who you are now. I remember one of my guests, Ron, he had said that his whole thing, he was unfortunately, he was riddled with cancer and he was very ill. And when I interviewed him, and he was actually talking about how he would just go back and he would want to have that opportunity to tell people that, he loved, to make sure that they knew that he loved them,
Mm-hmm.
because there's not something that you can, because you are who you are. And if you're honest with yourself, you love who you are. Nobody wants to say, well, I hate this person that I am. Well, if you hate that person so much, you're going to change. So you're where you are because of who you are, and then who that person developed into. And so that younger self, if you can go talk to them and say, hey, just do this, just tweak this a little bit, because who knows, had you done whatever, maybe you wouldn't have met your wife. And with that, you wouldn't have had your kids and all this different stuff. There's so much that you can Just
For sure.
from, yeah, I wish X, Y, Z would have happened, but had that happened, ABC wouldn't have happened, like I said, so I think that's a fantastic answer. And I just like to get that from people to see what their, because there's some folks that say, I don't know. I don't have anything. I don't have anything to add to that. And I don't think I have any kind of regrets. And I don't know if so much a regret, just more of I would have liked to zigged instead of zagged or whatever at a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
So I do want to, I do want to kind of tell everybody that listens that, you can find us on find the What's a Hero podcast on Instagram and Twitter and on LinkedIn. I'm there, and on Facebook. The What's a Hero podcast has their own page. You can get on there, talk to us. If you have questions for Jeff, you can ask me and I can send those forward to him. And, if people if they have diabetes and they want to kind of get on your Facebook page, where could they find that?
Yeah. So my Facebook group is called Breaking Diabetes. And it's just a simple search in Facebook, or they can search me up on Instagram. It's just Jeffrey.Huet, and JEFFREY.HUET. So there we go.
And if you got questions or you got thoughts, or because I know people who have, their kiddos, they developed diabetes at some point, and they have to adjust how the kiddos, do things. They got to carry around a bag with them wherever they go, and and I think there's a point when they're able to just another. It's another thing. There's not a concern with it. Is that right? There's a point where it's part of me. It's what I do.
Yeah. I wholeheartedly, it's just throughout my experience, when this is where I could really go off on this, Ken, is my parents, we really took it on as, hey, Jeffrey, this is the thing that we're going to do now. This is part of us. It's a family thing. We're going to support you. And it has to, in my opinion, it has to become a norm. And with it becoming a norm, then it doesn't become a huge giant deal.
There you go.
It's some extra responsibility. My mom always referred to it as a blessing. And there's a reason why, I was diagnosed with it, because I could handle it.
Yeah, there you go.
So, yeah.
And I think that's a great attitude to have, why, people that say, why is this happening to me? Because you can handle it, because God put you on this planet to be able to do that. And he knew you had the strength to do it. And so I think that's great. And I was going to say, do you have one more thing you want to add? But I think that's fantastic enough right there. You have it because you can have it, because you can handle it with it. So, Jeff, I want to thank you so much for coming on today. It's been nothing but a pleasure talking with you. And, maybe in the future we'll have you come back on again and chit chat we can just go off and just have a diabetes episode, if nothing else. And you can tell us how to do things, and maybe not, but,
no, Ken, that would be cool. I love talking about it, to be honest with you. Some people are like, oh my goodness, how can you talk about that? It's a disease. It's like, today has been fantastic. I can't thank you enough.
Oh, that's cool. No, I'm glad you came on, and you're very welcome for coming. And, like I said, if you are going through life and you are struggling and you don't know, you got these things that are in your way that are saying, hey, I used to be able to do X, Y, Z because but I can't now because I have this, or this is in my way, or whatever. It's never too late to be able to say, I'm going to change. I'm going to change who I am, what I am, how I am, because I'm going to be in control of whatever, and I'm not going to let it be in control of me. So, for Mr. Jeffrey Huet, I appreciate you coming on. I have been Ken Frownfelter, and this has been the What's a Hero podcast. We are clear.